Right, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Nicholas Adams. I'm going to stay behind the mic. I'm director of TI Tokyo. My talk today is entitled RIAK'S Rebirth. Now, today I'm going to be talking about a number of topics. There'll be a brief introduction as to what RIAK actually is for people who are not previously aware and what actually happened. That's exciting. And we're back. Right. After that, and we're going again. And we're back. This is fun. Is this meant to happen?
It only happened once last hour. Just once, but then it was fine from then.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. So we shall talk about the community, what we're actually doing, how RIAK is progressing. We're going to be talking about where RIAK is, where it's going to be with the releases that are upcoming, the future of where we expect RIAK to be over the next couple of years. And we're going to finish up with a brief Q&A session of maybe 5 to 10 minutes for anything I failed to cover, as that's probably going to happen. Right, so moving on, a brief introduction about myself. My name is Nicholas Adams. I am co-founder of TI Tokyo, an IT consulting agency, surprising enough, in Tokyo. I had never heard of Erlang before 2016, which may sound a bit strange to see me standing here at an Erlang conference talking about an Erlang product. That said, despite my complete lack of knowledge of Erlang, I still managed to make it somehow as a Basho CSE, helping service a number of clients around the world when they had issues with their RIAK installs. From there, even more bizarrely, I've become the unwitting developer of RIAK'S. Some of you who are on the mailing list may have noticed these really pretty birds who then turned back into a nice little RIAK man, and I made the release of RIAK'S 2.1.2 RC2 last night. And finally, for people who've been using the more recent versions of RIAK KV, I'm the person who's probably been packaging them. I do all the package releases once the official versions have been made available by the guys who are actually developing the code. But enough about me, let's talk a bit more about RIAK. First of all, RIAK itself was based on the Amazon Dynamo paper. For people who are not familiar, this is a paper about distributed databases. It covers CAP theorem, the concept of databases being able to be either consistent, available, or able to survive in the event of network partition. Of course, in any given situation, you're only likely to be able to survive through two of those. RIAK chose to be available even in a situation of partition, but to compromise, it offers a situation of eventual consistency where it will merge together the data once the network partition has been removed. From there, RIAK itself was, believe it or not, created before it reached Basho. RIAK was originally conceived in the interview flight for one of the engineers to go to Basho, where he wrote some source code on his computer on the way that he thought the interviewers might be interested in, and that went on to grow and become RIAK itself. That said, RIAK became quite popular. The venture capitalists who invested in Basho invested even more money, and the family grew. RIAK, the original database, was renamed RIAK KV, the key value store. The family was extended to include RIAK'S, the cloud storage that I've been working on, and the runt of the family, as they say, RIAK'S, the time series offering, which was a really great product, but far too late to market. That said, there have been some other extensions to the RIAK family people may be aware of. RIAK Core was commonly used for distributed systems, an excellent piece of OTP work, which is commonly used outside RIAK as well. And of course, there are the client libraries, which many people use to help their applications talk to RIAK without having to do things directly through protocol buffers or HTTP interfaces. Anyway, from there, as we know, Basho was a venture capital company. The investors wanted to see as much return on their money as quickly as possible. They forced Basho to do some undesirable things. And rather than wait for the guaranteed returns that would have come in a few years, they wanted their money as soon as possible, which caused Basho to basically curl up and die. There were a few attempts to revive it. Trifork came in for an attempted buyout in April 2017, but they looked at the numbers and ran away screaming. We came in and offered a complete buyout. We'd offer a multi-year payback. We'd honour all the existing support contracts, even though the money had expired. But they still said, no, we want cash right now. We don't care about the clients. We don't care about the code. We just want money now. So we were refused. Someone is definitely going to buy it. So it came to May, nobody bought it, Basho folded up, died, vanished. Lots of clients who were in very difficult situations, they'd paid for support, they'd paid for updates, nothing happened, no money coming back. They're stuck on a product that has no potential future, has no support, and they don't know what's going to happen, except turning into birds. So what people did was there are three basic options. If you were big enough and had the money, you'd employ one of the recently jobless former Basho staff who are now desperately looking for jobs. Yes, there are people in the audience, thank you very much. You have the next option, which was go through a very rapid migration to a third-party product that would allow you on the plus side to have a guaranteed code base and continuation, plus support. But on the minus side, you'd have to rush into a process which is potentially dangerous and cost-ridden. Or the third option, which was the only option for some of the smaller clients, was essentially hope it just works. And to be honest, for most of the smaller clients, it did just keep working. Even without support, they were able to successfully continue running Basho for quite a while afterwards. But still, it's not a good situation to be in, and people will eventually migrate off. So what happened? Well, the community came together. But who is involved in the community? Well, first of all, the biggest player, and the people to we owe the most thanks to, would be Bet365. I assume many people here have heard of them. They're the world's largest online betting organization. They bought all of Basho's IP from the liquidators and made it all open source, which has been absolutely awesome for the community as a whole. They use React to run their online betting system, and to give you an idea of the scale they run with, if you look at their average Saturday, they put more queries through React in that period of time than Amazon does on the entirety of one of its Black Friday sales. So it's pretty intense. From there, the next major player involved would be the NHS, National Health Service from the UK. Formerly a large investor in Basho themselves, they use React for their Spine 2 system, which is essentially a system that takes all of the United Kingdom's health data for every single patient and makes it available to every single hospital, doctor's surgery, anything throughout the entire UK as one united system. To give you an idea of the scale of these guys, they are said to be the world's largest employer. Full stop. Yep, celebration birds, that's how good they are. And finally, from the next major contribution to the birds in the contribution section would be TR Tokyo ourselves. We are the world's only 24/7, 365 enterprise support offering available for React. Basically, after Basho folded, we realized they still have a lot of clients still out there who were looking for support. We had been doing Basho support for APAC at the time, so we went on to hire some of their former Basho engineers from other regions, and then took the support settings on and continued going globally with them. But finally, and in some ways more importantly, the most important contributors are people like you, people who are literally in this room. Thank you for the cell libraries. But yeah, seriously, everybody, regular day people who get involved, you test something, it breaks, you feed it back. That's still important to us, that counts. And that helps make React better for future releases. But more importantly, what does the community do as a whole? Well, first of all, we have our new website, which is currently online but still work in progress. Please check it out, but check it out a few times. This is getting better day by day. From there, we do full open source releases. I'll detail this a bit more. In the Basho days, they would do an open source release of everything except a couple of features. What we've done in the open source community is we've taken what were originally reserved for enterprise-only edition features and bundled them into the open source releases, so you now get all the features that you would have had before, but this time it doesn't cost you quite a few thousand yen per node, quite a few $1,000s per node to do it. We've added new functions, which I'll be detailing in the next few sections, and we also have a lot of support for people. There is, of course, the professional support that we provide, plus in the various community options, we have the Slack channels, the IRC channels, and of course the GitHub, the mailing list where people are able to list their questions and have somebody who probably works on the project or works in support jump in their spare time and try and answer their issues. And of course, that will naturally lead to bug fixes and patches, which we also take care of when we have time. But what is the current situation of RIAK itself? The most recent release is version 2.2.6. This is the first official open source release. I say official open source release. Originally, we planned to call it 2.2.5, but in the final release settings, we realized there was a problem with the tagging. There was actually 2.2.5 in existence for some of the tags and not for others, which made a horrible mess, so we just gave up and called it 2.2.6. And everybody was happy with that, so that's where we are. What does 2.2.6 actually offer you? It gives you multi-data center replication in open source. What are the joys of multi-data center replication? Well, that essentially lets you to have your data in two physically separate racks, or data centers if you prefer, to give you geographic, I've forgotten the word. Redundancy. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, give you geographic redundancy. It allows your data to survive if one of your data centers should go off completely, and people can still access it. You just need to change your DNS or load balancer to point accordingly. From there, there are fixes to core claim, where in some situations, when you put data into RIAK, there would be unfortunate situations where you'd end up with 2 copies of your data on any one given node, which is not ideal for redundancy. So this has now been fixed where this should not happen. To go from there, however, that situation is technically negated in situations such as in failure situations where you only have 1 or 2 nodes you can actually reach. For example, in a network partition. What this will do in this case is you now have a new option called node confirms. This will allow you to choose how many physically separate nodes your data has to be written to actually count as a success. Even if you have 2 nodes up, you write 2 to one and 1 to the other. If your node confirm setting is 3, then even though you've written 3 copies, they're not to individual, not to unique nodes, so it will return a failure telling you to write it again in the future. Other changes that have been made, participation in secondary indexes. One problem people tended to run into is if you've recently added a new node to the cluster, this would still be able to participate in secondary index queries despite the fact it hasn't received all its data yet. This could result in incomplete data scenarios or inconsistent secondary indexing results. What this has done now is there's an operator flag that is set which will not allow the node to participate until all the data has been received, after which the node can then receive all its data and finally participate happily in secondary indexing without causing the inconsistencies previously experienced. Finally, the test suite. This was a bit of a nightmare moment. Traditionally, testing for RIAK-KV was a bit of a black box with each developer keeping each bit to themselves, and we couldn't get the test suite to work. This has since been remedied. This test suite is now stable and it works, so we can put every single release of the new versions of RIAK-KV through the entire test suite before making it public. So therefore, it should work before people try to put it in production. From there, we next have RIAK-KV 2.9.0. RC2 was released earlier this month. RC3 is coming soon. We expect a full release not long afterwards. This introduces many new features, one of the key ones being a tic-tac active anti-entropy, which I always find hard to say, so I'm going to call it AAE from now on. Tic-tac AAE is, the naming comes from the original betting language used between bookies for placing bets. It was called tic-tac, where they'd use it to signal between each other what the current situation was. Could get betting across quickly. Tic-tac AAE is similar to that. It bounces between hash trees. The original method of hash tree rebuild was it would look at the old hash tree, take the hash, the new one. Are they different? No, complete tree rebuild, which was very resource intensive. Now, tic-tac AAE bypasses this by splitting it into a multi-level tree. Therefore, it will say, is it the same at the top level? If not, it goes down a level and compares, are they the same here, and keeps going down and down and down in the tree until it finds out where the discrepancy originated. And once that discrepancy has been found, it then rebuilds that part of the tree to go back up, which allows partial tree rebuilding instead of a full tree rebuild, which saves heavily on resources. From there, we then have a brand new backend, Level ED. This is intended as a drop-in replacement for Level DB. It's written entirely in Erlang. That means it's part of the Erlang VM natively and doesn't need to have external libraries to be passed to, separate memory setup, separate config, etc. It works very nicely. It's much faster. It's far more efficient. It's just wonderful and we love it. Please check it out if you have a chance. Other things we have, vnode soft limits. This is one where people would often make multiple queries, and if you're unlucky enough to land on a vnode that had a large queue, your request will go in at the top of the queue and you'd have to wait for the queue to clear before your request got served. Now, if you were lucky enough to end on a vnode that was doing nothing, you'd have your result right away. If you're unlucky enough to end up on a full node, you're going to sit around for a while. Of course, this is still a conversation of a few milliseconds to a few seconds, but still, the principle is still there. So to get around it, we now have vnode soft limits. This allows you to set a limit on how many queries a node can handle before any new queries are pushed off to a different vnode. That way, your chances are you're more likely to land on a vnode that's empty and have your request served a lot more quickly. Excuse me. From there, we then move on. Other new features would be the core node worker pool. Up until now, resource-intensive functions, such as folding over keys, AE tree rebuilds, these would be large resource-intensive processes that go in the background. Some of them you'd be able to configure, for example, the AE tree rebuilds, so they wouldn't use too much of your active server's resources. But other ones, such as folding over keys, was just heavily resource-intensive and didn't really do anything in your favor. It would slow down your clusters. It could even cause them to fall over. So how do we get around this? We separated all out into a core node worker pool. This worker pool would essentially allow you to have one place that consolidates how all these background functions work. So you'd be able to control them all from this location, while simple ones, which are standard gets and puts, just go through automatically and not handled. The bigger ones, such as the folds, the AE tree rebuilds, and the large functions, will be handled through here, and it would not impact overall cluster functionality. Finally, in the new functions, we have an API to talk with REPL for the replication. Basho's originally multi-data center replication worked. It's generally good, but there are always a few finicky bits that each client found didn't quite do exactly what they wanted, but it was close enough. So they tend to write their own little bit of code to fudge it around the edges so they got the result they wanted. In this version of RIAK 2.9, we have an initial application of the REPL API where you can literally plug in your own code much more easily than previously. It allows you to replicate specific areas rather than having to go across the entire cluster for replication. And there are a few more features which will be updated even further in coming versions. So that's the current situation of RIAK. I'm going to move on now to talk about RIAK'S 2.12. This is the first open source release of RIAK'S, a project officially declared dead by Basho in 2016. It's come back to life. This gives you the EE features, which, for many who don't know, RIAK'S is a cloud storage client that sits on top of RIAK. It allows you to use the S3 API to store objects exactly as you would in Amazon S3. And the EE features that you now get are, first of all, proxy get. That would allow you to have, let's say, a cluster in California and a cluster in New York. Now, let's say you're in California, you talk to the California cluster naturally. It makes perfect sense. Somebody uploads a 100 terabyte file to New York. It hasn't synced across yet, MDC hasn't caught up. You want to check out your file, what's going on? You query California and it says, I don't know, I don't have a copy. But using proxy get, it's actually able to reach out through the REPL interface to the New York cluster, grab your 100 terabyte file, pull it across and pull it down locally. So you've essentially managed to see your file even though it's not replicated across fully yet. In addition to that, there's another feature called superclusters, which has been heavily employed by some of our clients. One of these has over 300 nodes with 6 clusters set up together using this feature. What it does is it allows you to join together multiple clusters, even if each cluster is using different hardware within that cluster. It will still let them all talk to each other, and you can set weighting. So, for example, let's say we've got one cluster that runs off SSDs, another one off old magnetic media. If you have important data, you make sure it's written to one. You have your slower data read off the other one, or you can just bounce it around for load balancing. It's a very flexible function that essentially allows you to spread your read and write data however you want across the clusters instead of across individual nodes. From there, to make CS a bit more attractive, we have new things. We have experimental support for signatures v4. A classic complaint about RIAK'S was it was only signature version 2 compatible. There is a small caveat for this. This is covered in the release notes. Essentially, there are a few. This is work in progress, but for all intents and purposes in our tests, it passed every single test. Why is this good for us? Essentially, putting us back on signature v4 makes us a swap-out replacement for Amazon services, which is ideal for many clients who prefer to keep their data in-house rather than sharing them with some other people they don't know about. This version of CS also brings to us a new one, multi-version KV compatibility. Traditionally, CS was limited in that this version of CS can only work with this version of KV. This was a nightmare for clients who wanted to update either one or the other, but instead had to update both pieces of software at the same time. This version of RIAK'S gets around this. We've tested it successfully with React KV 2.1.4 version. We've tested it with React KV 2.2.6, the first open source release, and 2.9.0 release candidate 2. It passed every single test that were provided in the original Basho suite, with the exception of the 3 tests that require compatibility with the now obsolete RIAK'S 1.5, which we don't really care about. And other than that, we have a few bug fixes. There was a potential code injection vulnerability in the React init files if you had access to the files. This has now been tidied up. There were issues with some clients who wouldn't be able to handle a trailing equals sign in file names, but that's also been tidied up. Basically, issues like that. So, moving on to talk a little bit more about the future, we have React KV version 3 going forwards. The first major change to this is a lift up to OTP 20. Believe it or not, React still runs on OTP 16. There is a custom version made by Basho to enable a few additional features to run within the React suite, and this forcing us to be on a custom version of Erlang has made things hard to upgrade so far. However, we've decided to bite the bullet. We're actually going to push all the way up to OTP 20. Work is already firmly underway. We're expecting a release candidate potentially April, May-ish, but that's still a little undecided. However, that will allow us, as this is going to be pure OTP 20, the standard upstream version, that will allow security updates to just be brought straight down and pulled into React. Other functional updates to be then folded straight in, and should also allow us to springboard on to later version of OTP without such the upgrade headache we're going to experience this time. From there, we're going to have some consolidation of BISCASC and level ED functions. One that many clients are looking for within React is the option of a hot backup solution. This is available on level ED, but this is the new version of the backend. However, BISCASC does not currently have this functionality. For clients who are going to be upgrading their existing BISCASC installs through to the later versions, we thought they'd be very much find this hot backup and similar functions desirable to have within their infrastructure, and therefore adding these functions to the next version of React KV. Other ones slightly further down the road, we have the merge of the React KV and CS code bases. As I mentioned earlier, we have proxy get and superclusters are functions that exist in RIAK'S, which would be desirable for many KV users. But on top of that, the ability to then use KV by itself as a standalone swap-out alternative for the Amazon platforms is a really powerful tool to go forward in protecting your data. Protecting your data in-house instead of trusting it to third parties in the cloud. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, there are some issues where people want to list their keys. Key listing in React is painful. It's incredibly resource intensive. We've seen people do this and had their clusters fall over because they weren't planning properly. Did it prime business hours? No. So this is one that people have been traditionally warned not to do. It says never use this in production in the docs, but people never read the docs, so what do you expect? To avoid this problem, we're now introducing throttled folds over ranges of keys. That allows you to actually do this previously taboo operation without having your clusters fall over. In fact, you can do it during business hours, and it will still only give you negligible impact on your regular services, which you can still get away with. Those are all the new features we have planned. There will be more coming. There'll be more talks about React. There's the next one at Stockholm, which I already know is underway. But we still want to see more people. So how can you guys get involved? How can you continue to bring this previously thought dead project back to life and expand it even further? So first of all, please play with React. We're giving you new versions. Play with it. Ask us questions about it. How do I do this? How do I do that? Oh, I did something stupid. Now what do I do? These are the classic ones we really want to see. But even once you do that, check out the new website. It's work in progress right now. It's going to be finished, we expect, very soon, but it's going to start answering your questions. Essentially, it will be a hub where you get access to all the previously scattered parts of Basho information. Before, you had to go to GitHub, you had to go to Slack, you had to go to IRC, you had to go to the docs, you had to go to downloads. They're all over the place. Really hard to find and not always very well meshed together, whereas the new website is going to try and combine them all to one place, give you a centralized chat server you can talk through to each other, ask each other questions, access to all the docs, access to all the downloads, of course, and a site-wide search, so you can actually search for things not only within the docs, but within the site itself. Also, contribute on GitHub. This is an Erlang conference. You guys are good. You're probably better than me. Please help, write stuff. I know you should be able to. And that would be really awesome, as it makes my job much easier. Thank you. Speaking of which, yes, that comes roughly to the end of my talk. I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody for your time, for listening to me waffle on like this. I'm going to enter the Q&A time now. For people who are not quite sure what to ask me, as I know I can be a bit intimidating at times, we have ask about React products, which is always good. Ask about companies using React. Yes, they still exist. Yes, they are famous, just you don't know about it. Ask whether React is a good cause for good for your use case. It probably is, but it may not be. Ask first, rather than be bitten later. Ask about getting involved. We love to hear these questions. Please, please, ask me that one. And basically anything else you'd like to ask, such as where's the nearest toilet? What time do we have lunch? Anything else? Please, go ahead. I open the floor to you. Thank you. Yes, Lisa.
How do you guys decide what features you build next?
Oh, right. This is a very interesting question. Oh, sorry, yes. How do we decide which features are built next? This is a very interesting one. There can be a number of drivers behind this. Bear in mind the community contributors. We have Bet365 and the NHS, who are very large-scale active users of React. If they use something in-house and they think it's good, they release it. That's one way new features get built. Another way new features get built is somebody asks somebody, how do you do this? And one of the guys who's in the project says, that's a really good question. Let's make it happen. I mean, if you're on the mailing list last night, you'll see somebody asked a question on how to implement expiry within Level ED. The function doesn't exist yet, but it should do. So we're going to make it happen. And it was a simple Q&A session that made that happen rather than anything severely in depth. So if somebody has a great idea, that's how new features get built. Somebody just wants to build something, that gets built. We have a group of people who are interested in Yokozuna and Solar, implementing future versions of that. There were originally messages going out saying this would be dropped from further releases, but then this little group came together and said, we're going to do this. So it's going to happen. It's awesome. That's how open source works. Hello. Yes. Are we ever going to have ROXDB support as an alternative backup for Level DB? That's a very good question. I can honestly say I don't know right now. I can take your contact details at the end and try and update you when I have more information, but I'm afraid at this point in time, I'm not aware of this. I'm sorry. What is the address of your new website? Oh, the address of the new website. I will nip back in time to try and find that for you. It is www.react.info. If you look in your goodie bag, you should actually find Yes, you should find birds. There we go. The birds have found the answer for us. Aren't they wonderful? So yes, if you look in your goodie bag, you should actually find a small pamphlet which details where the website is. It's currently work in progress, but it should be pretty good sometime next week, we hope. But yes, work with us. It's a community project. It doesn't always happen like magic. It happens when people have free time. Yes, sir.
We used RIAK Ensemble on a project years ago. What can you tell me about that?
I'm going to be perfectly honest. I've never used RIAK Ensemble in my life. I'm afraid I can't tell you anything. But again, please give me your contact details. I'll find out for you and email you back.
There was actually a discussion on that on the React Slack channel not too long ago.
All right.
Yeah, so there's some possible people on the React Slack channel. Unfortunately, that's one of those that work.
It wasn't actually supported technically by Basho.
Sounds like something we're going to have to do.
Yes. Anybody else?
Okay, well, feel free to find Nicholas during a break time and ask him more questions if you have any, but thank Nicholas again for this great presentation.
Yes. Thank you very much, everybody.